Okay. Okay, Latin 2. I know it's been a wild ride. There've been a lot of videos for Latin 2, and this is just going to be the case. There's a lot to do in Latin 2, and in some ways, it's one of the most aggressive Latin courses. At least the way it's structured, where we live. If you're a stranger to me and you live somewhere else, maybe your Latin 2 is done differently. Maybe some of the topics I've been talking about are in Latin 1 or Latin 3. I don't know. But hopefully it's been useful to you no matter what. And as far as we're concerned, before we hit the spring break, we have just one more topic that we have to hit. And we got to hit this one. It's a big one. Present participles. Now, luckily for us, it's not an entirely new topic. We have already begun talking about participles, but when we talked about participles last, we only saw one type of participle, and there are multiple types of participles. So, right, first things first, let's remind ourselves that participles are verbal adjectives. That is the thing that they are, all right? Do not forget that. A participle is an adjective, and the kind of adjective it is a verbal one. It doesn't matter if it's a present participle, a perfect participle, or even a future participle, which we haven't talked about yet. It doesn't matter. All participles are verbal adjectives. They are adjectives, they describe nouns, and they are verbal in their nature, okay? So, last time I used band names to describe these, and here's a couple. I think I used Smoking Popes before, and here's another one, Caged Animals. I don't know if you guys know that band. They did music for a podcast I like. Right? Both of these words that are underlined are participles, but they're different kinds of participles. Smoking Popes is a present participle, as in describing the popes as doing something right now, smoking. Whereas with caged animals, that would be a perfect passive participle, something that's already happened and happened to the animals, not something that they did, right? So this is what we talked about last time, the perfect passive. We found out all about what that looks like. Today, we're going to add this one, the one that ends in ing, the one that people are a little bit more aware of. When you say the word participle, they tend to think of those words that end in ing in English. And so, yeah, this is what they look like in Latin. So I'm going to start with this verb as an example. Fleo flere happens to be one of my favorite verbs just because I think it sounds pretty. It means to cry or weep. And this is what it looks like when you turn it into a present participle. You'll notice that in the principal parts there, I've got fle underlined in the infinitive flere. That's because as a present participle, I'm going to use the present stem. That's the great thing about things that are present, is they pretty much always just use the present stem. It's awesome, right? Present verbs, present participles, present infinitives, they're all based on the good old present stem, and you can use the present active infinitive to find the present stem. It's everything before the re, right? Same principles that we had for present tense, or really all present system verbs. So you start with that stem, and you can see that in this forms table that I have here. Every single one of these forms starts with fle. Now, the thing that makes it a participle is the nt that comes after it. Now, I know you're already going to say, but wait a minute, not all those have an nt. It's true, the nominative version has ns. That's because this is a third declension pattern, so we have ns that changes to nt, but after the nominative singular, it stays the same the rest of the time. It's always nt, and then whatever appropriate third declension ending you need. Depends on what case it is. So these endings are not special. They are third declension endings. So if you already know your third declension endings real well, cool. Nt plus the third declension ending, you're done. If you don't know your third declension endings very well, this might be a great time to review them because you need to know them. You need to know them of their own accord and for this. Now, there are a few discrepancies. You'll notice I put every gender on one table. That's because in the third declension, there's no difference between masculine and feminine. So literally, all these words you see here could be masculine or feminine in context. There are a few discrepancies for neuter. Right, because in the neuter, the accusative has to match the nominative, so we have flens repeated, but only if it's neuter. And in the plural, instead of flentes, you would get flentia. But everything else is the same no matter the gender, all right? If you need to look at that table again, don't worry, your textbook has reference tables. It'll be with a different verb that they'll make their participles from, but there are plenty of tables you can find in your books and online. And also, one of the great things to help you remember your present participles is English, actually. We get a ton of words in English that are derived from present participles. This is just 5 random ones that, when I was setting up the board earlier in class, me and a student in here with me could think of. Just random ones. Agent is from ago agere. The present participle would be agens agentis. Cut the ending off. Agent is what you're left with. Same with participant, right? That would come from participo. Actually, I think it would be participio. Anyway, there's a vowel grade change there because of English, or actually because of French. I don't know. I'm not going to get into those particulars. Anyway, point being, kogo kogere comes from kogo. Well, sorry, cogent comes from kogo kogere, the present participle of which would be cogens. Efficient comes from efficio, the present participle of which would be efficiens. Do be careful because you do have to have an I and an E there because it's an IO. And then fluent from fluo, fluere, right? The present participle of which would be fluens, right? These are literally just present participles in Latin with the endings cut off to make English words. And in many cases, their meaning is still pretty right on and literal with its original meaning. Right? Agens means doing, therefore an agent is a doer. Participans would be taking part. A participant is someone who takes part. Kogo kokere, the meaning of that one's actually kind of hard to explain the process of, but basically it usually in Latin means to force or compel, but eventually it also gets used in a metaphorical thinking sort of way. So it also ends up giving us the word cogitare to think about, which is why cogent means what it means in English. Efficient comes from, efficio, which is basically an intensified version of the word to do. And fluent comes from the word that means flow. So it would literally mean flowing, which is what fluent things are. They are things that flow. So yeah, that's literally just what they are. We make tons of these words. I couldn't begin to tell you how many of these words exist, and in addition to the ones that are already common in English, you could just make more. You literally could just take Latin participles and change them into adjectives or nouns and use them in English, and anybody who's familiar with the vocab term will understand you, even if it's not a normal, already coined word. Anyway, let's use a few of these in actual sentences as examples, just to make sure that we, are good to go, right? So we know we're going to translate these kind of like they're verbs. They're going to end in ing, but they're not actually verbs. They're descriptors, okay? So every single one of these sentences is going to have a verb in it that is not the participle. And I've got the participle written in a different color. Here, it says, you are able to hear Luke crying from the other room, all right? So I've got my main verb, you are able, audire, to hear. And then we've got our direct objective here, which is Luke, and we're describing Luke as crying, all right? This is something that he was doing when you were able to hear him, and then prepositional phrase from another room, right? So my main verbal idea is my main verb. It's my finite verb, potest. But there's actually 3 verbal ideas going on here, because I have my main verb and an infinitive and a participle that describes Luke. And if I were to parse this, I would say that this participle is present tense. I would say that it's active voice. I would also say that it's masculine, accusative, and singular. It's masculine, accusative, and singular because it describes Luke, who is masculine, accusative, and singular. And then I would say it's present and active because it was describing something that Luke was doing or is doing when you were able to hear him. All right? Let's see another example. All right? In this sentence, I have many participles. I have an abundance of participles, 3 of them, and in different cases too. So what this says is, standing in the kitchen, I saw Leia playing with a fleeing mouse. All right? And so, my base idea is, I saw Leia in the kitchen. That's the base idea. Right? But I'm describing Leia as playing, because that's what she was doing when I saw her. I'm describing myself as standing, right? Playing here is in the accusative because it's describing my direct object Leia. Stans is in the nominative form because it describes a subject, which, because my verb is first person, it's me. I'm the one who is standing. And then I've got fugiente here, an ablative describing the mouse, which is the thing with which she was playing in the kitchen. Actually, this hasn't actually happened. As far as I know, we don't have mice. I hope we don't. Although she does keep trying to get at something behind the dryer. Might be a mouse. Anyway, hopefully if there is one, she gets it. Let's try one more example. And you'll notice in this one, I actually have, again, multiple participles, but not all the same kind of participle. Because, you can have any number of participles you want in a sentence, and they don't have to be the same type. It all depends on what you intend to say. And of course, this is, not talking about my cats. This is getting more at one of those age-old truths about cats, or at least wondering about it anyway. So it says, why do cats sit at an open door refusing to go out when you have opened it for them asking? This last little bit sounds a little awkward in English. That's not quite how we would phrase it, but it is a pretty normal way for classical Latin to be phrased. So what I've got in terms of participles here is I've got nolentes, refusing or not wanting, which describes my cats, right? And because they're both third declension, present participles are always third declension, but my noun being described also happens to be third declension. They even have the exact same ending. That's kind of cool. If you wanted to parse it, you would say that these were, masculine, nominative, and plural, right? I've also got a present participle down here, quaerantibus, which is dative and plural because it agrees with illis, not the same declension, but they are still both clearly plural and either dative or ablative. In this case, it's going to be your dative of benefit. You open the door for them. Cool. I've also got aperta, which is a participle, but it's a perfect passive participle describing a door which has already been opened. And the reason this one is perfect instead of present is because this participial idea happened before, whereas these participial ideas were happening at the same time as their main verb, all right? And it's definitely at the same time as the main verb. Present participle isn't necessarily happening right now, but it either is or was happening at the same time as the action is suggested by the verb, right? So how you actually translate it might vary contextually a little bit. You just got to know that these are happening at the same time. This happened before, right? And this is something that cats really do. Sometimes they want to, go into a room or outside or whatever, and you open the door and then they just sit there, even though they were definitely asking. They were definitely asking, and they just sit there. And they don't go, but you've opened the door, and then you close the door, and then they ask again, and it's like, oh my gosh. But hopefully this example makes sense to you. There's actually a lot going on here. It's, kind of a long sentence. It's not the longest sentence you're ever going to see. But despite the fact that it's 12 words long, it actually has 6 verbal ideas in it. For one, because there are 2 main verbs. I went ahead and underlined everything that was verbal, even if it wasn't a participle. We have 2 main verbs because I have 2 clauses. I have this main clause, and my main verb is sedent. I have a subordinate clause starting with the conjunction cum. We'll talk more about those in a little bit. And my verb in the subordinate clause is this, aperuis. Sorry, I have a hard time saying that. Aperueris, there we go. And then I've also got an infinitive. Right? I've got an infinitive here because nolo nolere, the verb not to want, takes a complementary infinitive. Now, here my nolo form was a participle, but it can still take a complementary infinitive. So I've got 2 verbs, a main verb, a subordinate verb, a participle, an infinitive, and 3 participles. It just goes to show you how, by adding even just a single subordinate clause and a few participles, you can actually express a lot of things happening by adding up and stacking these verbal ideas onto just a single sentence, right? So again, when you translate this, it would be, why do cats sit not wanting to go out at an opened door when you have opened it for them asking? All right? So that's how participles work. That's how you translate them. You translate them with an ing. They're going to describe a thing, at least translate with ing if it's a present participle, ed if it's perfect. And yeah, that's how they work. I assume you're going to have questions about this. I assume you're going to need to practice more with it. Cool. We'll do that. All right. So hit me up with those questions as they come up, and I will see you soon. Bye.